Today I'm going to talk about something that has a major impact on in how people end up succeeding inside of law firms and really in their legal career, and it's their family and social background. And it's something I think that a lot of people really wouldn't expect to influence how successful you are, but in my experience it's something that has a major impact on your level of success and how well you're likely to do inside of a law firm. So it's very common for people to go to excellent law schools and then go to very good firms and then have legal careers that go nowhere, despite what you would see in terms of their background as being the people being very suited for doing well in the practice of law. And you really can have every advantage on a silver platter, but none of this really matters if you don't have values and a perception of the world that will support you doing well in your legal career. And frankly, a lot of people don't have it, and certain people come out of certain backgrounds without that, and it ends up doing them a lot of harm. So when I was young, maybe 18 or 19, I guess 18, I was living with my father and his soon-to-be ex-wife, and they were going through a divorce. And my dad was living in the basement, and I was living upstairs with her son and daughter and his soon-to-be ex-wife. And it wasn't a good situation. It was contentious. People weren't talking. And it just wasn't pleasant in the least. And each day I needed to go to the kitchen and pass them in the halls and so forth. And it was difficult. And I was a high school student and not enjoying myself and in an environment where I didn't feel accepted and felt like an outsider in my own house. So one day during all this, and my dad obviously wasn't too happy about everything either. I was speaking with him outside, and I just had an experience where I walked in the kitchen, and I don't know, my stepbrother said something like, "Oh, it's great getting a home-cooked meal from someone who cares about you and having a mom," or something. I don't know, but it wasn't a pleasant, nice thing to say. And my dad at the time wasn't that happy about his situation in his life. And he wasn't only upset about the divorce, he's in his early 50s, and he felt that he had not, by any stretch of the imagination, achieved as much as his peers from college and law school had. And he felt that they were much more successful than him, and that made him feel bad about himself. And he also felt bad about his marriage collapsing. It was his second marriage, and he'd had a fairly good education. He'd gone to Harvard for college and then Michigan Law School for a year, and didn't do well there and left. But he just didn't feel good about himself because of that. And what struck me at that age was he had so many things to be happy about. He had enjoyed writing, he enjoyed playing tennis, he did enjoy the job that he did, but he was allowing others around him and what their expectations had been for themselves to influence him whether or not he was happy or not with himself. And I think a lot of people do that. They look at other people and they see how those other people are doing, and they allow that to influence how they're going to feel about themselves. And I think everybody wants to be around others that approve of us and love us and make us feel good. And we need the support of others to feel good about ourselves. And everyone strives to do the best they can, and to get others' approval. And I think what my father was saying is he didn't feel like he merited others' approval. And a lot of that came from the environment that he had been in. And a lot of people on this call, I'm assuming, have worked very hard their whole lives and have tried very hard to go to the best schools they could and be part of the best social groups. And going to a good college or law school, in reality, what you're learning at any college or law school is pretty much the same. It's not going to be much different from any college, from college to college. What really differs, though, are what other people around you expect. And the expectations of the people around you and your peers are really the reason to go to the best schools and be part of the best law firms and the best social groups, because different peers and groups will have different expectations. And if you're around people that have very high hopes and very high demands for themselves, and you desire to also fit in with those people, you're gonna be trying harder and doing better. And that's and setting higher goals and expectations for yourself. And I can honestly say that choices that I made about things such as where to go to college and where to go to law school and what firms to work at and things were in a large sense influenced by my peers, if you can believe it. What they thought was important were things that I picked up. And so it's like that with anybody. I mean, if you're around peers that have high hopes and high expectations, you're going to pick up those. And so that's really the whole reason to try to be part of the best firms and schools and so forth, is because of the people that you're going to be around. And achieving more of anything is really, when it comes down to it, is about just being around people that, set high standards. And your standards are really going to be set in a lot of cases by your peers. And if you work in the best firms, that's going to help you. And being in the best schools is going to help you set higher standards. And it's going to set your thermostat at the level of what you expect to do and what you think is important in terms of your own achievements. So when I was younger, for several years, I had an asphalt business around Detroit. And one of the problems of any business is getting people to do the work. And there were certain types of people that I could hire and others that I couldn't. And I learned some very important lessons in that early on. And when I started in the business, the most obvious suspects of people to hire were kids that I knew. And all I needed to do was increase the amount of money I was offering, and I could always find kids to do work for me. So I would go to parties on Friday nights. Typically, I would do a lot of work on the weekends, and I'd stand around a keg and I'd talk about this money-making opportunity, and I'd always find people to do the work. And I'd pick up kids in the morning and we'd go out, and the work was very difficult because I tended to do like a lot of parking lots, and there's no shelter, so they're just exposed to the sun and it's hot, and we're working with tar and asphalt and so forth, and it's just very unpleasant work. And it was actually common for people to disappear and leave these jobs during the middle of them, and it was just very difficult. And at the end of the day, we'd often use gasoline to get the tar off us, and it would burn, and it's just not a fun job. So a lot of times I would have people work on Saturday, and then they would quit, and so I would need more people to help me on Sunday, and so I would go to parties and find people there too. And so typically I would recruit people to parties every weekend and then try to find people that way. But there were lots of problems with hiring kids from my neighborhood or kids that were my age and in the same social circles. Is in the kids that I was associating with upper middle class or middle class kids, they didn't want to work for their peers. They weren't making as much money as I was making. They were concerned that others saw them. They didn't necessarily doing super hard manual labor. And not only that, they wanted something in an office seemed more appealing to them, and they didn't like how the work made them feel, how they felt like the work made them appear to their peers. And because it was difficult to get those people to do the work, I learned after 1 or 2 summers that really the best place to get people to do the work was in working class neighborhoods where people were willing to do the work, and where there was more people that were hungry for the work because of how much I was paying, and people also that appreciated the work. So a lot of the people I would hire would be in Detroit or in white working class suburbs of Detroit, and when I would hire people, they would actually appreciate the work. They'd be ready for work each day many times. They didn't believe that they were better than the work. They wouldn't complain. They would work one day and then they work the next, and instead of feeling bad about themselves for doing this type of work or working for me, I guess, they felt good about the work, and they had a situation that made their peers from better economic environments not like the work, but they actually really liked the work quite a bit. And when I was going into these neighborhoods, I would pay people much better, and they were happy. And because other people around them thought that this was a great opportunity, I was paying too much, and it was crazy to pay so much. They were supported by the people around them, and their expectations weren't that they were doing this job for a short time and then they would do something else. Their expectations were more in the line of, this is something that is a really good opportunity. And so I realized early on that I was much better off hiring people that were from a background where people around them supported doing the work and where they believed in the work than I was hiring people that were not from those sorts of background. And people supported around them, which is important. Their environment thought it was great. And their peers made them feel good and so forth. So I realized that, and it is an important point, that how others see us and our work determines in many cases how we see ourselves and how much we appreciate our work. And most of us want to feel seen in a positive light by others. In our jobs, it's very important that people see us in a way that, that we're approved of. And our sense of self-worth for most people actually is influenced by how others see us. Our jobs and so forth are important, and they influence the way that we're seen, and that is a big deal. And I think that deep down, everybody really wants to be loved by others. And so what do we need to do in others' eyes in order to be loved and approved of? And our self-worth is based on how others see us. And a lot of times it comes down to the type of work that we're doing and how others see that. When I was hiring people, they would often not work out because working in the asphalt business, when I was hiring people for my peers, it was not something that made them feel good. And it didn't make them feel high status in the eyes of others. And high status means one thing to people of one background versus another. And that's just kind of how it worked in the asphalt business. Now, over the past 25 years, I've noticed that one of the most competitive and demanding law firms in the country to get into, Cravath, Swaine & Moore, hires a lot of people from the University of Iowa and other schools that are similar to that, not just there. And a lot of these people are from middle class to blue collar backgrounds. And a firm like Cravath could hire people from Harvard, Yale, and other schools of that caliber at the top of their class all day. And they do hire people, but they also hire people, a lot of people that come from these blue collar type backgrounds. And in my limited experience, I've seen a lot of people that come out of University of Iowa end up doing very well at Cravath and actually much better than a lot of people from the best schools. And I think that one reason for that is, and I don't really know all the reasons, but I think that for those people, they believe that it's a great thing, and they believe that working there is something that makes them look good and significant to their peers, and their value system, it's compatible with that. And a lot of people that I've known from top schools that go to work at Cravath look down on it. They believe that the hard work isn't worth it, and they don't like it. So that's what I've seen, and I don't know if that's completely true, of course, but I've noticed that, and it's just an anecdotal thing. But I believe that the value systems a lot of times with people will determine how successful they are inside of a law firm. One of the things, too, that's interesting to me is I look at people from different law schools and different backgrounds, and people from Yale Law School are often more likely to value being a professor or doing public service or working for a nonprofit than the graduate of an average law school. And I believe that a lot of that comes from the peers and the value systems and what's considered a good thing for graduates at that law school, and what people look up to and what other people talk about and want to do. And a lot of the attorneys from Yale Law School that I've known, and I know countless ones, are unhappy in major firms. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that the value system of that firm emphasizes different types of work and not necessarily that. And the school gives people and their peers have a different idea of what makes someone successful and where your fulfillment should come from. And there's also the idea, too, that the school may be selecting people like that. But as a general rule, that's something I've noticed quite a bit. And I've also noticed in many cases that many people, the most successful men and women, tend to need to prove something a lot of times to their parents. A lot of times their parents may have made the child feel that they would be more loved or they would get more approval if certain milestones were reached to be successful. And a lot of times this approval never comes. Even when the child grows up and becomes much more successful than their parents, will never often be as successful as they or get the love that they're seeking. And one of the things that is important for everyone to understand is a lot of us don't really understand what our value is unless it's reflected to us by others. We're told our values by our parents, what should be important, and that's either reflected back to us with approval or disapproval, and they will set expectations for us about what is and what is not important in our lives. And then the people that we're around will set their identities. Our identities will be formed by the way others see us and their judgments of us. And if people approve of us, then we'll feel worthy of love and have feelings of worth. And if they do not, we may start to believe that we don't have worth. And different environments will reflect to us our values, depending what sort of environments that we're in. So I think, and this is really one of the most important things for you to understand, and it will determine your success, is one of the most important causes of unhappiness, I think, is that when our internal value system dictates that we need to be a certain type of person to be successful, and then we're not that person, and we're incapable of being that person. For many people, their value system may say, I need to have a family and be around people that love me and approve of me. And others, for a lot of other people, it's economic or social achievement. People believe it's almost, I have a neighbor an old neighbor that bought a Bentley convertible that was fluorescent, green, and it's just crazy. And it almost seems to me that he wanted that car because he needed to show he was worthy of love or something. I don't know, but a lot of times that may be what success means. Success may also mean working with certain types of people, or working with a particular firm, or having a certain title. And a lot of times people are very unhappy with their lives when they don't measure up to a certain value system. And this value system, in terms of what's important, will be in many cases determined, in most cases, by the people around us that we're comparing ourselves to on an ongoing basis. And if we're not achieving what we should accomplish in our peers' eyes, then many of us just become very depressed and very disappointed. And that's just not a good thing. You ask yourself, how do people cope? And so when you watch people around you in firms and your peers and so forth, you'll see lots of different ways. And one of my best friends in high school died of alcoholism in his early 40s. And I guess what had happened to him is he just drank so much that his heart stopped. And he was from a very successful family. His father was a very successful builder, and his older brother was very smart. And he'd been around very successful people, and he went to a private school, and I don't know why he was there, because he wasn't the greatest student, but most of his peers went on to very competitive colleges and were good athletes and did other sorts of things. And he never felt really that successful because of the people he surrounded himself with. Every day he was reminded by his brother and his parents and all sorts of people that were around him that he wasn't measuring up. And maybe it was just because of his internal clock, he wasn't able to really be himself. Rather than play this game, he dropped out and he started smoking a lot of pot, drinking, and feeling sorry for himself, which is something I think that a lot of kids do and a lot of people do when they feel like they're not the person that they're expected to be. People do it in different ways, but they rebel and when they can't kind of reach that level, and it happens to people all the time. And when it came time to apply to colleges, he thought he was going to go to Michigan State because his family had endowed a professorship in the construction school or something, or whatever it was there. They had some sort of program, but the school forgot to flag his application as the child of an important alumnus, and he ended up getting in initially. And then he was so upset he went to the University of Colorado Boulder without any special treatment, which is good that he got in there. But once he was there, he just continued drinking and using drugs, and I was asked to leave, and this downward spiral just continued. He never felt the equal of his parents, peers, and family, and other people around him. In my opinion, he would still be alive if he hadn't judged himself and his life based on the people that he was around and the belief that he needed to be like them. He was surrounded by very successful people. He needed to believe that in order to be successful and worthy of love, and he needed to be like them, and that was what he was getting from his environment. And you're getting something from your environment. I don't know what it is. Whatever environment you're from, you may be getting certain signals as well. And are you rising to them, or are you sinking to them? Other people will sink to and will never be able to get rid of the hold of their environment on them. Not too long ago, I dated a great lady that was very smart. She was motivated. She was beautiful and nurturing and had all sorts of really great characteristics. And I really cared about her a great deal. And while she had all these characteristics, one of the biggest problems that she had was just someone else with an alcohol problem. And every night she would drink, and she would do the same on the weekends. And on the weekends, she would often drink all day. And every night, and I didn't see her only a couple of times a week, but every night she would, drink a bottle of wine or two and want me to talk to her on the phone. And it just wasn't that enjoyable because she would become incoherent and I wouldn't drink at night, and I just didn't enjoy it. And then she'd get angry when I tried to get off the phone and go to sleep. This person was depressed and unhappy and had all the money she needed, a beautiful house, car. She was very successful and was a great mother, but the problem too was her, that she was using substances like my friend. And the thing about her that's interesting is she was from a devout Mormon family and took her religion very seriously. Her family took the religion very seriously, and she'd gone to BYU and studied theology and had all this religious texts and so forth that were all over her house, and she put post-it notes on it and took it very seriously and had read all these books and studied it. And her family expected her to go to church each week. They expected her to participate in church, and so she'd done a lot of things wrong according to the church. She had a child out of wedlock when she wasn't married, when she was younger, and then as she became more successful and was raising a young daughter, she started to believe that the church was sexist, and so she ended up leaving and the church. And this created profound disapproval of her from her family and her peers. And when she started and didn't feel good about herself because of that, and she wasn't really living the life that her parents and sisters and brother, and everybody expected her to live, and she was depressed and felt bad about herself because of that. And so just like my friend, her value system was she needed to be a certain type of person because of the people she was surrounded with, and when she wasn't that person, she just coped with alcohol and other things. But the church still had this major, it's very impressive, they had this very good support system, and people would still stop by to see how she was doing. They knew what was going on with her, and they would text her and call her, and I think she appreciated the interest in her, but at the same time, it reminded her that she wasn't living up to the value system of what the church expected of her. And so the two of us ended up breaking up, and after that, she actually went back to the church and started training for a marathon, and then stopped drinking and became happy again. And the thing is that just she had a value system, and that value system said if you're not living in accordance with that value system, you're not worthy. You shouldn't be worthy of love and happiness. And it was out of kilter, and she was out of kilter with what that system expected, and doing that made her unhappy. So that example, though, that I just told, I think that if you look at your own life and you see the ways that your value system and the people around you, how they influence, it may not be religion, it may be what your parents expect, it may be what your peers expect, but that value system will impact how happy you are. And are you living in accordance with someone else's value system? And most of us are. Most of us have been impacted by the value systems of our groups and what those groups think is important. And if you're following a value system like that, you'll realize that not being following it completely may actually make you extremely unhappy, but it also can make you very successful being around the right people if you rise to it. My stepbrother, the son of my stepmom, the both of them that weren't very nice to me, he went into the Navy and then came back and went to Michigan State for a couple of years and then dropped out. And he was very excited to have gone to Michigan State. He'd gotten a GED in high school, and he left at the age of 16, I think, to enroll in the Navy. He left high school at the age of 16, and when he went to the Navy, he got disciplined and he felt successful, and he was grateful to have had that experience. And not only that, he felt incredibly successful. He got a position in the accounting department with General Motors with only a few years of college, and ended up being a successful executive there and having a good life, and actually very happy. And his mother had been a secretary and never graduated from high school, and then he managed to get 2 years in Michigan State paid for by the Navy. And today he lives in Michigan, and he's got a half family, a nice house, a good job, and was very grateful for his experience and his environment. His mother and everybody around him just thought he was doing very well. And my other friend, of course, is dad. The expectations that our environments have really can have a major impact on us and what happens over the course of our lives, and even whether or not we live or die in many cases. The value systems that we have will determine in many cases how hard we work and the level of achievement that we reach. And when I started hiring people at the blue-collar neighborhoods and the working class backgrounds and so forth, I noticed that the people were different. When they were working, they would sing and be happy. They would laugh at jokes, and they wouldn't be worrying about the same sorts of things and uptight. They were much happier than people that were from middle to upper middle class backgrounds. And they knew what their role was. Their environment supported them doing that work. They saw things that made them happy. For example, going into a nice neighborhood sometimes to do the work, being by the water in different parts of Michigan, and getting out of their areas. And they really were happy for their jobs. And a lot of that came from the fact nothing was different. The only thing that was different was what the work meant to them. And to them, it was fun stuff. It was working in different neighborhoods that they didn't get to go to. It was making a lot of money. It was having a lot of advantages that, and things positive about the work that their peers didn't necessarily think were positive. I've seen so many people drive themselves to insanity when they don't meet the expectations of their families. And years ago, I hired a guy who had grown up in a very Orthodox Jewish family in New York, and he was part of this Orthodox community. He certainly was religious, but he didn't want to dress in all black and do all the things that this Orthodox community did. And when he was 19 years old, he left home and never returned. And his parents thought there was something very wrong with him. They didn't understand why he didn't want to grow a beard and marry a woman in his religion and dress the traditional type of dress. And so in order to avoid that, he moved across the country to California, talking to his parents, and ended up actually resigning from the bar and went over to Asia and spent years just wandering around. And I think that a lot of that happened because the girl I told you about in the Mormon faith, he felt like he was incompatible he was not living in accord with what was expected of him. Anyone that wants to, and I talk about this a lot, can be very successful. And all you need to do is you need to basically set a goal and keep working and not give up. And that's typically the recipe for being successful. And you don't need to be especially intelligent or anything. If you really apply yourself, you can be successful. And everything is really, to some extent, within your control. Anybody who wants to can be a lawyer. Anybody who wants to can, go to college. There's just a lot of opportunity. But the problem with that is the world really is a meritocracy, and you're really responsible for your achievement. And if you're not successful or you don't get what you want, the only person you really have to look at is yourself. And you can be anybody you choose to be. In different societies in the past, people were held back by their social class and where they were born. But in this particular world, wealth and success and power are really all within your reach. You can honestly have anything that you put your mind to. You can be very successful in business. You can do the same thing with entertainment. People that apply themselves can do a lot of different things. And even the law schools and colleges, they use these tests like the LSAT and SAT to try to make everything about merit. And they want to make everyone take the same test. Getting into the best school is not based on being part of a family that went there for a long time. It's going to be based on merit. And people want things that are equal. One of the things that society does, and all societies do this to some extent, it happens in India and it happens in all sorts of different societies, is we want diversity, we want equal rights, we want to make sure that the playing field is as equal as possible, because meritocracy is just a major thing that of major importance to the society. If some groups don't necessarily get the best test scores for whatever reason, we may want to not use the same measuring stick and de-emphasize these things that we try to use for meritocracy in order to get them to advance them. And that's just the way society works. And then even with that, a lot of times there's certain schools like Harvard and the University of Chicago that have abolished the SATs. So those not abolished, but they don't require them anymore. And everybody wants to have equal wealth, access to wealth, prestige, and success based on merit. And that's something that we really, the society really believes in. And if the SATs aren't fair for whatever reason, then we don't want to use those. And so everybody wants to have equal access to success. The problem, though, with I think with a meritocracy is under a meritocracy, people are responsible for their own success. So if you're not reaching your goals and achieving what you think you should be doing, society holds you responsible. If you have access to education, but if you don't make the most of it, you may be left feeling like my father, someone that had certain advantages but did not reach his potential. And you may believe that success is impossible regardless of the advantages you're given. And then the other thing that happens is if you're not as successful as you think you should be, you may think there's something wrong with the system and that there's problems with meritocracy and it's not alive and well. And so you'll then strike out, like you can see a lot of groups do, and be angry at the system. You'll blame society and you'll blame that you need a new solution, and you want to tear down the systems that you're and the symbols, statues and other things that you may believe are holding you back. And the higher conflict, though, within yourself and within society, if you think about it, is based on feeling that you're not living up to the person or what you think you should be. And you may blame society, you may blame politicians, large companies, groups in power, and others. And what that does, and this is important, is that it puts you in a position where you're able to blame others for your lack of success, and instead of placing the burden on yourself, which actually is where it belongs. Everybody has responsibility and the ability to be successful if they figure out the rules and apply themselves. And you're never going to succeed by making others responsible for your success. It's something, or your lack of success. It's something you need to figure out and be able to do on your own. I read a story about Steve Bing recently. Steve Bing jumped off a high-rise in Los Angeles at the age of 55 because he was depressed. And when Steve Bing was 18 years old, he inherited $600 million. He went to Harvard Westlake School in LA, which is considered the most prestigious school in Los Angeles by far for high school. And then he attended Stanford University, and then he dropped out his junior year to be a film producer and did produce a bunch of films that were successful. Steve Bing was a very successful guy, and he had a child with the British actress Elizabeth Hurley. He was friends with Bill Clinton and lots of other very successful people, and traveled in all the best social circles, was a benefactor of all sorts of charities and very well liked. But he also was an alcoholic. He had drug problems. He had never met his two children, one with Elizabeth Hurley, and he denied paternity. And then it was found that he was the father. And then he had a second child with Lisa Bonder, who was the former wife of Kirk Kerkorian, and also denied that. So there were some things that weren't going on very well. So despite all this, he wasn't a happy guy. And why would you not be happy if all that stuff was going on in your life? And the reason is because the person you believe you should be does not match how you feel inside. And obviously something was very far out of kilter with him for him to jump off a high-rise building and commit suicide and feel the need to abuse substances and so much. People believe that they need to be a certain type of person to merit love, and they may believe that they're not that sort of person. And so in terms of Bing, I'm not a psychologist, and I don't know what was upsetting him so much and where things went wrong. But obviously being around all those very successful people and having certain expectations for himself, it wasn't working out for him. A girl that was working for me not too long ago had a husband who's a lawyer, and he left a very high-paying job with a law firm to start his own law firm, he was making probably $300,000 a year. And I said, why did he do that? I asked her. And then she told me that what he said to her was that he was Persian, and Persians will never work for someone else more than a few years. Now, that's obviously it would be a racist statement but if it's what she said, he said. It's interesting. There's all around LA, there's this huge contingent of, a lot of them are in Beverly Hills, but there's lots of families that have came over from Iran. Many of them came in the late 1970s to early 1980s, and they all settled where other Persians settled, and they're the group that came over, and I don't know, maybe it's just a certain type of person that came from Iran, but they have a reputation for being very good in business, especially real estate, and very good business people. And different groups have different expectations for their followers. And after this girl's comment about her husband, I realized, and I just thought about it, that I've worked in 2 law firms in Los Angeles, and I knew 3 guys who were Persian that were in my classes or in the same age group last year, and all 3 of them left working in the law firms after a couple of years and started their own firms, and then they started real estate companies. And so I don't know if that's a coincidence or not. And then even a girl that I'd hired right at UCLA Law School had left to start her own firm after she worked for me for 6 months. I don't know that all that's true, but then I was talking to another Persian guy, and he said that he was going to leave his firm because no Persian guy wants to work for firms forever. So if you think about that, I don't know why, and I kept seeing this, and this is also all self-reported, and you're talking about an ethnic group, so you need to be very careful about not being called racist when you're just putting things together that people are telling you. But I do believe, and I think this is true, just like the Mormon girl I was talking to you about, different families and different groups of people, the people around them form their expectations. And maybe the groups that have come over, or the culture of Los Angeles in terms of people from that ethnic group, are that you should start your own real estate company. I don't know, that would be crazy to say that, but I do believe that the people who were around and the groups of people that we're from will, in many cases, inform what you believe makes you successful and what you need to do, you believe you need to do with your time, and what you need to be. And I don't know that's always the best thing. One thing I could say is, what if I was uniquely suited to be an attorney, and I was Persian, for example, and be an attorney and work in a large law firm? But what if everyone in my family believed that you never want to be a law firm attorney very long, and I should never aspire to? And what if I learned from my friends and families and others that the only thing I should do would be an entertainer, and that would be, I was expected to do that by my environment? And what would I do? If my whole environment was telling me to be an entertainer, that's probably something I would end up doing. And so it's just something to think about, that what happens to you in many cases is determined by the people around you and by you trying to do what you believe you need to do to earn their love and to be accepted by them. One of the things I noticed is that children often realize the unrealized dreams and ambitions of their parents. I told you earlier that my dad flunked out of law school, and then I went to law school and didn't flunk out. Tiger Woods' father wanted to be a golfer, and when he wasn't, Tiger Woods became one. And there are countless examples of actors and athletes, lawyers, doctors, and others who never realized these kind of ambitions, but then their children ended up doing. And when the parents have an idea for success and happiness, the children may have the same thing as well, and that's important. And maybe with me going to law school after my father didn't do so well doing it, maybe I just wanted to fix maybe a part of my family history. In conclusion, and this has been a fairly long discussion, but it is important, your values come from the people around you, and your happiness and your lack thereof may be dependent and may be coming from the people around you. And the people around you may tell you what you need to do or how you need to feel in order to be successful. And your feelings of feeling worthwhile and good may have more to do with what's going on with them than what's going on with you. And our communities are going to color your values, and you're going to get different values depending on where you live and the people you spend time with and the work you do, the peer groups you're part of, your background, and how you're raised. And it really has a lot to do with everything. And I heard, I think it was on television actually, it was a person I was saying that his only options were to either be a professional athlete, musician, or drug dealer when he was growing up. And that was his value system. And if he'd grown up in a different type of neighborhood, he would have had another. And you really need to think about where are your values coming from, and how are people impacting how you feel about yourself and what you should be doing. I see people on a regular basis that go into law firms and just don't have the values to succeed there. They're smart enough, but they're not around people that are supporting that. In my case, for example, like I never came out of a law firm environment, or my parents didn't, and I had no one to really provide me advice and so forth. And had I had that, I probably would have stuck with it longer. And your thoughts about leaving the practice of law or staying in it may have been influenced by your peers or your parents or others, and it's just how it works. And there's so much or so much unhappiness that happens in the world, and people are so unhappy because their careers are often out of alignment with what they believe they need to be, or maybe their lives are. And if you're surrounded by a certain type of person, you're always going to be reminded that you could be that type of person, and the people that you surround yourself with really are going to have a lot of impact on your level of happiness and your level of success. When I was growing up in my family, there were lots of problems that I talked to you about earlier. There was divorce, there was substance abuse and sub-families and so forth. And so that's depressing. And when you're a kid, you can handle in different ways. But what I did, and what you and other people may do in a similar situation, is I avoided spending time with the best kids. The kids that were the most successful, like I told you, my best friend died of alcoholism. So I would deal with kids that were equally unhappy or coming out of those things, because I really didn't want to be reminded of what I was doing or what I wasn't doing. And when I got into college, I did the same thing. I joined a fraternity with a lot of the most troubled kids, and because I didn't want to be reminded of the things that I could do better, or I didn't want to be reminded of what I wasn't doing that was important. And I was processing stuff that was happening, and that's just how it works with a lot of people. The big thing, I think, is that you need to expose yourself, and you need to develop your own value systems, and really realize that the value systems of the past may have held you back, and you don't necessarily need the value systems of others. And you need to realize about the reasons you're doing things may have to do with the value systems of others, and a need for their approval, and to feel a certain way. And would you be happier if you weren't living under those value systems? And how have those value systems helped you? They may have helped you quite a bit. When Anthony Robbins was younger and getting started in the self-improvement business, he was invited to be part of a group of very important men that flew around the world on private jets, and they associated with each other and discussed different ideas. And this was a membership group, and everyone had to pay something like $250,000 an annual membership to belong to it, because they were flying around in jets and so forth and staying in expensive places. And Robbins, I guess, didn't have the money at the time, and had to scrounge it up. And the person who asked him to do it said, regardless of what you may know about self-improvement, nothing's going to change you for the better like the people you spend your time and associate with. And he said, the values you pick up from them are worth more than it will cost you to spend this time with them, which I thought was very interesting. And according to Robbins, who's still part of this group, it was the best investment he ever made. And it changed his life far more than anything he could have by reading books, because he was associating with very successful people that had very good values and a lot of different things. And the dynamic going on beneath the surface of each one of our lives is, am I worthy of love from myself and others? And we believe that we're worthy of love based on what we see we need to do to earn love from our environment. And if you don't feel worthy of love, you may have allowed others to do a number on your mind with their value systems. Their voices may be a constant presence in your head that are questioning every move you make and your value to the world, and it's just not fair to do to yourself. And your real value is only going to come when you abolish others' expectations and allow yourself to be happy with whatever you choose to be. You need to have a value system that makes you happy, and that you can be satisfied with, and it will determine what happens to you. All right, I'm taking questions now, so let's get started. The first one is, let's see here. I lost my job in November of 2019. I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. I review 20 plus websites a day and attempt to network on LinkedIn and ACC. I've had about 6 responses for interviews, but nothing has materialized. Any suggestions? Okay, that's a good question. Certainly, you're obviously doing something wrong in your your search.
I don't know exactly what type of work that you do,
But you said ACC, so I'm assuming you're looking for in-house work. You should also look at law crossing, by the way, which is a very good source of positions. But one of the things I would say is that if you've been unemployed for as long as you have, which at this point it looks like is almost a year, you're doing something wrong in your search. And the thing that I recommend people do is looking just at positions that are on job boards can be helpful, but at the same time, you're probably limiting yourself to a great extent because you're only applying for jobs that lots of other people are applying for. And over the past several weeks, because of this pandemic, there have been a lot of layoffs. Because there's been so many layoffs and people are losing their job, you're competing against a lot of people. And the longer you've been unemployed, the harder it is going to be for you to get a job. So my recommendation is what you really should be doing is you should be applying to firms and places that don't necessarily have openings, and you should be applying to places that are in your industry that you've worked at before, and also to make sure you're on top of that. Doing the best you can in terms of finding those types of positions is really going to be in your best interest. If you're only looking at positions that other people are applying for, it's just that much more competitive. The other thing you need to be doing, I would recommend, is this, where you're watching this webinar, or.com. There's all sorts of videos that I've recorded in the past and so forth that talk about how to track down jobs, where to look for them, because looking at websites for jobs each day is not just the only way to get jobs. There's lots of very proactive stuff you can do that I teach. There may also be issues with your resume and what you're saying on there. Most employers, unless they're in-house, are looking for specialists. And another thing you can do too is you can also be geographically flexible. Certain markets are very difficult to get jobs in. There's age discrimination and all sorts of problems. You need to be very careful in terms of the way you're applying for jobs. You need to be strategic. That's something that I would recommend doing. But obviously what you're doing is not working and you need to think in terms of other directions. Another thing too is not everybody is cut out for practicing law or wants to do it. And if that's the case, there may be other careers you can try. People do exceptionally well doing with legal skills doing other careers. So that's one of the things I'd recommend. Okay, let me see the next question. There's a lot of questions here. Let's see. Okay, you're talking something about, let me see here. Let me just answer this one here. I constantly compare myself to others and find myself feeling inferior often. What can I do to stop making these comparisons? One of the things I would recommend is it's important to not be always, worrying about what others are doing. Obviously, humans are tribal animals, and what I've noticed, and I've talked about this a lot before, is attorneys that are in major legal markets where there's just a lot of competition and everyone's comparing themselves, for the most part, seem to be, in my experience, are a lot unhappier are much more unhappy than attorneys that are in smaller legal markets. Many times it's the legal market you're working with and it's the people you're surrounding yourself with, and that's something that is important for you to consider. Who are you comparing yourself to? And that's a huge problem. If you're basing your opinions on what others think, then you're essentially saying that the other people are more important than me, and I'm going to base how I feel about myself on others. And that type of thought process may have been important when we're tribal animals, where if you were banished from the tribe, you couldn't eat and you would die in the wilderness, and that's probably something that's programmed into us from a long time ago. But it's something that you need to be very aware of that can impact your happiness, and it's very hard to escape the opinions of others. And for me personally, it really depends on who you surround yourself with, and surrounding yourself with positive people can make a real difference. Okay, let's see here. Peer group is not as successful as I am, and I feel like that's keeping me from rising up to the next level of my career. But at my age, I have no idea how to make new connections and surround myself with people at a higher level. Any advice? Yes, you need to get out and meet new peer groups and surround yourself with other people. There's a very good question, because I'm sure you're aware that being around certain types of people can keep you down. If you're around people that aren't successful, they're going to want to make you unsuccessful as well, because if you succeed, that's going to make them feel unsuccessful. Having a very strong peer group is very important. I remember when I was in college, when I was in high school, I had a friend that was trying to get me to do LSD, and he kept trying to get me to do it and kept trying to get me to do it, and I never did it. And then he explained to me that he felt like it had really messed him up, and he wanted me to try it because he felt like he needed someone else to share that with. I was like, that's just absolutely insane. He meant like it had done permanent damage to him, which I doubt LSD would do permanent damage, so maybe it would. And he wanted basically to drag me down with him. So the peers and the people that you surround yourself with really can have a major negative impact on you. And the same thing with positive people will set values for you that are very positive. That's important. Okay, I aim to work at a law firm like Cravath, but I didn't attend a top-tier law school. I found it very interesting that people from the University of Iowa do well at Cravath. I have applied to Cravath in several large firms, but have not gotten any interviews. Would you recommend I apply again to highlight my modest roots? I tried to downplay it in the past, thinking it would work against me. No. People that go to Cravath, by the way, from University of Iowa, they tend to be at the very top of their class. It's not something that a lot of people can do. And having modest roots, there's nothing wrong with that, but to get into some of these top New York and international firms, you do need to have a certain type of background. But having a modest background is good. If you have a certain work ethic and you work a certain way, that's going to really, in many expense, it will work to your advantage in the long run. Of course it will. Okay, let's see. How did we develop a new value system later in life? I feel stuck in my ways, even though I'm willing to change my outlook on life. So you develop your value system by the choices you make. Everybody's born with, I always think that people are born with a certain amount of genetics. You're born with your family's genetics, but then you get some of your own too. And so people have the ability to do some things on their own and to make their own decisions and to create value systems. So you create your value systems by deciding what's important to you. And I have certain things in my life that are important to me. My value system is based around trying to help attorneys, legal careers and jobs. It's based around having a happy home life, about being a good father, about meditating and exercising daily and things like that. And so you develop a value system based on things that are important to you, and a lot of times they'll be formed by other people. And I will tell you that at my age, I for so long was captive by other people's value systems. Just absolutely crazy. I spent a good portion of my life trying to live up to what others expected of me. And to some extent, I still am, because I'm living in a large, expensive city where honestly, it would probably be easier to live in a place that didn't have as many people with bad values around. So your value system is extremely important in the people you spend time with. And I've noticed even in my community, like where I live, there's a lot of people with very bad value systems, just a lot of them. And I certainly don't like it. And I think it's bad. The schools you go to have a value system. I know I live in Malibu, and there's some very bad kids that go to the Malibu public schools and that don't go to other types of schools in the area. And there's people that have bad values that live around me that think in bad ways. And I think the value system, the people you spend your time with, is hugely important, and can influence your happiness and your success and your contentment and all sorts of things. I try to once a day at least connect with people with good value systems, and I try to avoid people with bad value systems and keep them out of my life, and it's important. Okay, the next question is, let's see, I'm glad I'm getting all these questions about value systems. Usually we don't get as many questions about about other things. Okay, let's see. My family tries to be overly involved in my affairs, and it's really frustrating. I love my family, but they are getting in the way of my career growth. Right now I live close to home and I enjoy it here, but I'm thinking of moving away to distance myself from them. I've read some of your articles that it's hard to get hired in the city if you don't have any connection to the area. Which is what I would be up against. I went to college and law school at home and never lived in another state. Do you have any tips for getting hired in a situation if I'm moving to a city with no new connections there? People move cities and move to places all the time with no jobs there. You certainly should be applying to places or firms and so forth in that area that you want to work in. But overall, I think that you definitely can get hired in areas where you don't have a connection. Employers are out for their self-interest, and they're interested in hiring people that have certain types of backgrounds and certain skills. So you just need to find an employer that has a need for your skills. It is easier if you're living in an area, much easier if you actually get up and move to an area to get hired there. But at the same time, you don't want to leave a job without that. Okay, let's see. Let's see here. Okay, any recommendations for a senior healthcare attorney with no direct pharma experience who would like an in-house pharma or consulting job? I'm likely to begin an executive MHA program at a top school at and work in the same firm, or let's say work top school of public health this fall. I'm interested in a certain school. Yeah, if healthcare is a very active practice area, and it's actually always a good practice area. And one of the reasons that healthcare tends to do so well is it's a practice area that is where there's a lot of money involved. And anytime there's a lot of money involved in a practice area, people can do very well in it. And to the extent you go and you get an extra degree in healthcare law or an MHA program, that's a great idea. I place healthcare attorneys all the time, and even senior healthcare attorneys, because there's just a lot of demand for them. I don't know a lot about getting in-house pharma or consulting jobs, but I'm willing to bet if you do have a lot of experience, it shouldn't be too difficult, to do that. Okay, let's see here. Will you discuss a manager's betrayal? Don't we associates need our supervisor to be on our side for reaching goals and being promoted? How do we ensure managers are on our side in this respect? That's a good question. I don't know what manager I was talking about. This may have been someone talking about a presentation last week, but people will always betray you in firms and different environments, because the people that you're working with, they all have they have their self-interest, and people or managers have their self-interest, and employees have their self-interest, and everybody has their self-interest, and they don't always align. When that sort of thing happens, you may want to find a different manager or someone that recognizes your abilities. And yes, you do want firms and people that are on your side, and it is important. In every business, businesses need people to do the work, and the problem is that not employees in all businesses are not necessarily happy. It's like that in manufacturing, and there's unions, and it's that in offices. And the best thing you can do, though, really is that I recommend a lot of times is, if you're not treated well by a manager, and the manager is not someone you think will go to bat for you, then you have maybe time to look for a new place to work, or try to find a different manager or someone else to work under. Okay, the next question is, let's see, how do I showcase my goals and drive in interviews after years of having been just a temp? There's nothing wrong with being a temp, and there may be reasons that you were a temp. And so explaining different life events and so forth in an interview that led you to be a temp and need that flexibility may be important. People are temps for all sorts of reasons. You may have been a temp because your parents were sick. You may have been a temp because you were young and wanted to travel. I don't know, but there's all sorts of reasons that people are temps. The best way to showcase your drive in interviews and so forth is to get into interviews and just to really connect with the employer and to impress them, and to make them feel that you really want to commit, and explain the reasons you were a temp. Maybe the temp job paid extremely well, I don't know, but when you do get into interviews, you do need to impress people that it's not something that you want to do long term, and really convince the employer, because employers want to hire people that are hungry. And so one of the benefits actually of interviewing when you are a temp is the law firm really, one of the things that law firms look for when they're hiring people is they want people that are hungry and are likely to stick around and will try their hardest and do the best over the long term. And so if you can convince them that you'll work harder and be more dedicated and enthusiastic and so forth than other people, then they'll like that quite a bit. Okay, let's see. I have 20 years of experience as in-house counsel. Majority of the in-house positions I have found state that the candidate should have 4 to 8 years of experience. I have been rejected from a lot of these positions. Is ageism an issue? Yes, ageism is an issue.
Is when in-house companies are hiring people, and as well as law firms are hiring people,
a lot of times they want to hire younger people, because younger people, the perception is, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, that they're hungrier, that they'll work harder, that they want to get ahead more, that, and that also, if they're coming out of a law firm, that they have fresher skills and fresher training. And so with in-house attorneys, attorneys, what happens a lot of times over time is that in-house attorneys will do a lot of work, and then but they'll also become experts in politics and experts in giving work to other people outside law firms and that sort of thing. And so over time, the value of an in-house attorney, in some instances, not always, but the perception is that it will go down. So law firms really want to be very careful when they're hiring in-house counsel. Companies want to be very careful because they want to hire people with the freshest skills, meaning they've learned and they're still in legal mode, so they like hiring them from law firms. And they also want people that are hungry. They want people in a lot of cases that will more experts in doing the work as opposed to farming out work and that sort of thing. So there is a lot of ageism and discrimination, and that's one of the reasons. Okay, let's see. Here's another question. Do you have any particular advice for a 64-year-old attorney, had his own firm, tried 700 jury trials, much courtroom experiences, interested in joining a growing bankruptcy firm to learn the business and become a valuable member of a progressing firm? I have plenty of passion and desire to learn a new area of law. Criminal defense has been good, but the courts are really messed up with COVID. I want to pursue a new area and master it. I don't want to join a firm to leave and compete. I am open to careers in law, teaching, and nonprofits. What do you think the best record on treating with my proven trial skills?
So if you're a trial attorney, I think that your best thing you can possibly do is to continue what you're doing and or you could potentially teach in law school or that sort of thing. But at your age, which honestly isn't that old, but transitioning to bankruptcy and having someone train you to do that is going to be very difficult because they certainly don't know when you're going to leave. And the skill set to be a bankruptcy attorney is a lot different than what a criminal attorney does in terms of the type of emphasis. And you could also start your own bankruptcy firm, but I honestly think it's going to be very difficult for you to transition into a bankruptcy position without experience doing it. And as someone that has their experience running their own firm and doing trials and so forth, I honestly think you're much better off doing that. I understand the courts may be messed up, but there's certainly other types of work you can do. You may also consider a career with the government or even potentially going to a firm, and maybe if you're not interested in trying cases anymore, working in other aspects. But I would recommend, if you have that much experience doing something, that's really where your value lies. And starting bankruptcy at the age of 65, I think or 64 is a difficult thing. Okay, here's one final question. Let's see. I want to set up an informational interview with a partner at a law firm that I'm interested in lateraling to. Should I write or email them? How should I start the conversation and ultimately ask for a job without asking for a job? I think this reminds me of a question that was asked last week, but the best thing to do is really go in and just ask the people that you're speaking with, the people, and ask them to talk about what they do. And like I said last week, the way that those questions that typically works is people will many times will know that you're there looking for a job, and if they like you, we'll talk further about it. Okay, so that's it, but thank you. And I noticed there's still some questions here that we can get to also next week. Let me just see. And good. Thank you very much.